So first of all, let me add my welcome to all of you here and to those of you watching virtually. And I want to take a moment and thank our colleagues at the World Food Prize who have been so welcoming to our event here. I also want to acknowledge the hard work of all of the staff that put this event together. These things don't just happen. And also the staff here at the Embassy Suites who have worked so hard to transform this room. Let's give all the folks who made this event work a round of applause. So what do you say at a new organization's sort of first public event? Everything that you say is going to be precedent, and we don't have a lot of history to guide us. Or do we? If you'll take a moment, it's after lunch, a walk doesn't seem inappropriate. Let's take a little walk back through time. If you'll go with me, I want to take us back 18 decades. Let's start first in Mexico City in 1842. The Directorate General of Industry, including a department designed to promote agriculture, was formed in Mexico, and I think our story starts there. About a decade later, in 1853, the first agricultural college in Mexico was started in Chihuahua, and another half decade after that, in roughly 1859, the first agricultural college in Canada was launched in Quebec. Those of us in America know that 4 years after that, in 1863, land-grant universities were formed on the same day that the United States Department of Agriculture was formed. If you went forward 4 more years, Canada created its Department of Agriculture, and a little bit after that, Canada's first 5 experimental farms came online in 1886. 1 year later, in 1887, America launched its agricultural experiment stations, and 3 years after that, added the historically black colleges and universities to diversify agricultural education in America. Go forward another decade, it's 1902, we're in Canada, and Canada developed a system of things called agricultural trains. So this would be a train filled with agricultural experts that went from east to west along the railroads, stopping in various towns and provinces, and talking about agriculture to those people from the region who would show up to listen. A decade after that, Canada continued its expansion of experimental farms and its substations. And about that same time, in 1911 in Mexico, groups of agronomists, as near as history recounts, came together essentially autonomously and began to sort of ride circuits, presenting information to farmers, trying to increase agricultural productivity in rural areas. 3 years after that, in 1914, in the United States, the Smith-Lever Act was passed, creating the Cooperative Extension Service. That also marked the start of World War I, which was the first significant test of extension in the U.S. as we worked to increase wheat production and to manage war-related farm labor, farm labor shortages. Could move forward now to 1920. There's a very large expansion of governmental and academic agricultural programs in Mexico following the revolution. And then we would go to the Great Depression, where we saw crippling drought across the US and Canada that hit those countries hard, but also hit especially hard immigrant Mexican agricultural workers who were working in the US at the time. Go forward from there to the late 1950s and 1960s. Across all 3 of the nations, there are efforts underway with varying degrees of formality to take the large number of small farms, which basically aren't a lot more than subsistence operations, and cause them to start to think of themselves as businesses. And I'm going to pause here and add a little bit of my own personal reflection to this story. I grew up on one of those farms. Today, if we described an operation that used a 4-year crop rotation of oats or wheat, followed by alfalfa, soybeans, and corn, that used rotational grazing of 3 different species to make sure that we recycled all the nutrients as completely as possible, and we didn't put any inputs back into the soil, we might use terms like sustainability, regenerative agriculture, a variety of modern cutting-edge techniques. It was also the way of those small farms in the late 1950s and 1960s before inputs were readily available and affordable. So against that backdrop, in the United States, the Extension Service was trying to get farm parents, like my mother and father, to start thinking about revenues and expenses, profit and loss format. And so Extension would hand out these little bluish gray books. They had a hardcover on them. And when my parents both passed away and I was cleaning out the effects in their farmhouse, I found decades worth of those books tracking expenses. So out of curiosity, I opened the year that I was born and looked to that month. And under unanticipated expenses, I saw the heading birth of third son. So I have some questions to ask my parents later on. But that connection for Extension with me then led me through FFA, 4-H, where I often tell people I learned everything that I used as a university president and chancellor. The fact that as treasurer, you learned how to deal with other people's money. As secretary, you learned the importance of actually getting things done. And as president, you learned how to be an advocate for your organization. And it took me from there to land-grant universities, where I took degrees from the University of Illinois and from Purdue, a career in veterinary medicine, and eventually back to the role of advocacy on behalf of agriculture. And I tell that story because I think it probably applies to a great number of people in this room and tens of thousands outside it. The great agricultural colleges of Mexico, Canada, and the United States have now matured and are so much more than what they began, but they are part of the great success story that makes up this story of agriculture from these three nations that I'm going through. We then enter a period where private sector influence in providing agricultural information has been ascendant. For the past couple of decades, we'd be remiss if we didn't mention the signing of the North American Free Trade Agreement in 1994 and its renegotiation in 2020. And just last year, as Carrie said, the Global Forum for Rural Advisory Services authorized the North American Agricultural Advisory Network. So with that as context, let's ask the question again. Are we new? Or have we actually existed in different forms for nearly 200 years? I'd argue to you that this is our heritage, our lineage. Well, you can say that we've gotten some things wrong along the way, we've gotten some things right as well. But I think the important point would be that this common history shares things that are still absolutely foundational for us today. The knowledge that food and water are basic human needs. The belief that knowledge must be shared rather than hoarded. The understanding that the linkage of research to application to improve lives in real time matters. The responsibility that we all share at a national level to recognize and support those previous 3 points because they're vital to national security, to economic health, and to the well-being of our people. Another thing that strikes me about our lineage are the commonality of those dates across borders. I doubt those are coincidental, and so it likely points to communication across North American borders with what might be considered the best practices of the day, even as our nations were experiencing their own unique and at times transformational challenges. In short, what we do here today may be nominally new, but it is effectually rooted in principles that our predecessors have been putting into practice for almost 2 centuries across civil wars, revolutions, Great Depression, global conflicts, and societal upheavals. Feeding people mattered yesterday, it matters today, and it will matter tomorrow. Today we might use words that include sustainability. We might talk about the importance of bridging wealth gaps, of bridging the urban-rural divide, of delivering science that spans across different sizes of agricultural operations. We might talk about how to address global calorie and protein demand, while at the same time paying attention to consumer preferences for how those calories and protein are produced. All of that's a tall order, certainly, and one that can only be met, in my opinion, through collaboration and partnerships. And in that realization, I think, comes our charge for the North American Agricultural Advisory Network. To stay connected to the foundational elements of our heritage, to share our best practices with each other, and to never lose sight of the fact that our actions serve our fellow human beings, regardless of national boundaries, race, religion, or language. This is important work. We're proud to host it at Colorado State University, and we're proud to be a part of it with all of you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Chancellor Frank, very much. I would like to call up the panel, please, that will come up to the stage. So Rob Bertram, Melanie Miller-Foster, and Luis Martinez. Come and join me. And online joining us, and I'll introduce her in just a minute, is Mary Robinson from Canada, also a non-member. Are we on? There we go. Thank you. I'm going to introduce all of our panel members first, and then we'll have an opportunity to hear from each of them and sort of their thoughts and aspirations, experiences around education, extension, and research. So next to me, I have Melanie Miller-Foster, the co-founder of the Global Teach Ag Network from Pennsylvania State University. With Melanie today, and she'll go into this in her remarks, are the global guides and the global orientation for agriculture leadership called The Goals, a pre-service educators group starting their year together here at the World Food Prize. Next to her, we have Rob Bertram, the chief scientist for the U.S. Agency for International Development. Thanks for joining. And Luis Martinez, counselor for agricultural affairs, the Embassy of Mexico to the United States, and senior staff member in the NAAAN on behalf of Mexico. And online, we have Mary Robinson. I'm not sure, there we go. Mary, you're up, Mary. Mary Robinson, President, Canadian Federation of Agriculture, and a non-steering committee member, joining us virtually from Canada. So very excited to have all of you with us, and thank you. You're up. And Rob, we're going to start at the 30,000 foot level, please, in terms of AID's experience with research, education, and extension. And we'd love to hear some of your thoughts. You actually were part of the founding of GFROS as an institution and have a great deal of history in this discussion. So we'd love to hear from you first, please.
Okay. Oh, I'm already hooked up. Thank you so much, Carrie. And I want to publicly thank you and David Nielsen and my colleague John Peters, who I don't think is here, for being, oh great, I'm glad to know that, because he's the person I rely on for the real expertise in the area so much, Carrie. Advisory services. So I want to set a little context here by saying a little bit about Feed the Future. That's the U.S. government's global food security initiative. It came as a response to the global food price crisis, and we joined with Canada and other G7 nations back in 2010 to step up, and with G20 partners like Mexico as well, step up our investments in food and agriculture, which had really lagged, and we saw that we paid a cost for that neglect. The heart of our work is involving technological change, connecting farmers to market, and policy, good policy that incentivizes investments, public and private, all across the food system, on farm all the way to the consumer, retail, processing, all of it. Most of the efforts in Feed the Future are led by our USAID missions overseas and their partners that work in agrarian areas in our partner countries. And those same areas, believe it or not, are the hotbeds, they're the concentrations of high rates of extreme poverty and child stunting. So this is a terrible irony that these food-producing rice bowls and bread baskets of the world, or maybe sorghum bowls in parts of Africa, are also home to so much poverty and undernutrition. So part of this, though, is R&D investments with U.S. universities, the private sector, USDA, international agricultural research centers, CGIAR and others, but also, in every case, connecting to national partners in our countries where we work. And this is an evidence-based effort that focuses on inclusive agricultural growth. And just 2 years ago, the World Bank came out with a study that showed that that agricultural growth is up to 4 times more poverty reducing than other kinds of economic growth, especially in the poorest countries, which is where we work. So our key focus is on smallholder farmers. There are hundreds of millions of them, and they produce 60 to 80% of the food in those regions of the world where we work. So we like to think about changes that drive productivity gains, and by that I don't just mean yields, I mean labor savings, water use efficiency, reduced post-harvest losses, market efficiency, value addition, value preservation. So all of this depends on knowledge. And so that's why we've relied and partnered with the extension community all these years, but especially, I think, as part of our redoubled efforts since 2010, to extend new technologies, new practices. And I would just add that with the challenge of climate change, it's more urgent than ever. Old ways of working will not suffice. Growing old varieties, using outmoded water and land management practices, a whole range of things. And I'd say a huge amount is riding on this scaling up of our research investments. They're not just because we love science, they're because we want to change people's lives for the better. And again, the extension community, the agricultural advisory community is a key link in making that happen. And we do try to build off the land-grant university model. You mentioned research, education, and extension, and that isn't duplicated everywhere, but we can work with partner institutions in Africa, Asia, and Latin America to bring together those partners in ways that I think can start to confer some of the same advantages that they've provided in our country. So, like you mentioned, GFRAS, we have had partners with Digital Green, the whole digital revolution that's occurred along with the science revolution and things like genetics or animal health. These two things, we see them together. And how do we reach those hundreds of millions of smallholder families? There's a whole new set of tools. And of course, we have our tried and true public sector models, but we also have a lot of interest from the private sector, as I mentioned. And what we see emerging is kind of a plurality of approaches, Carrie, that where you have the public and private often working in partnership with the public sector, making sure that all the pieces are there and keeping an eye out for market failures. Let's say an indigenous group or a more marginalized group in our own countries or in overseas, we can be mindful of that and try to align resources to help make sure that inclusive growth includes them. I just wanted to flag climate smart agriculture is a key area where we think advisory services are going to be vital. I talk a lot about sustainable intensification. The intensification, the most important part for smallholders, knowledge. I mean, yes, inputs matter, seeds matter, but a lot of it's knowledge, markets, pests and diseases. And of course, we are trying to elevate diet quality. And you're going to hear that now. And that's trying to get at hidden hunger. Shakuntala Tilsted had mentioned today, in her work, the focus on micronutrients. These kinds of value chains are more knowledge intensive. So we need more even than before from the advisory service community in terms of helping smallholders diversify their production in ways that helps them grow out of poverty, but also provides affordable, safe, nutritious food. So these, it's not just about crops. It's, animal source foods, fish, vegetables, and fruits. These are all super knowledge intensive value chains. So just to wrap up, if you look at where the growth in agriculture is coming from, especially in the last 40 years, even in developing world, more and more, it's from the knowledge. It's not from using more fertilizer. It's not from plowing more land. It's making better decisions, using technologies and practices. And that's the environmentally friendly growth we need. That's the way we're going to try to simultaneously solve the climate challenge, the food and agriculture challenge, and the environment and biodiversity challenge. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. That was great. Thank you. Let's give each other. There we go. Thank you very much. The purpose of our panel, also just to remind you as we're entering into a discussion later, is food for thought. So we're going to hear from lots of different perspectives of how we see going into extension research and education translates into building the next generation. And with that, I'd like to turn to Melanie Miller-Foster, please, and for you to introduce us to your group and also to the way that we could work together perhaps through the NAAAN and advisory services in the future.
Well,
Melanie.
thank you, Carrie. I appreciate it. It's wonderful to be with you here in Des Moines today, and I guess also in cyberspace. So I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that we are all here in this room today because we've had educators in our lives positively influencing our trajectory. And in fact, I love to say that I got my start in 4-H. So while the suburban public schools I attended were wonderful, I felt seen in 4-H. It was a place for me to explore my interests with no limits, and it set me up for a growth mindset. And of course, all around me were a cadre of caring adults, the project leaders, the state 4-H staff, and of course, that county level 4-H educator. So as we talk about creating the next generation of leaders in agriculture, let us not forget the individual educators and the impact they have on creating that next generation, those future leaders. Those are the individuals that will make those educational opportunities come alive for youth. However, educators are often left out of the conversation when we talk about food systems transformation. When we do talk about educators and education, we often talk about developing curriculum, developing standards, building schools or other facilities, and things like buying computers. But the cross-cutting theme of youth is present in those conversations, but often the focus is not on the educators who make that curriculum and those classrooms come alive for youth. So in 2012, my husband, Daniel Foster, and I co-founded the Global Teach Ag Network in response to this gap in the conversation. How are we investing in educators? Educators live and work in the communities that they serve. They understand the community resources and the community issues. So, they interact with the youth and other community members on a daily basis, yet they're often thought of last. So the Global Teach Ag Network seeks to lift up the role of educators in agriculture and food systems transformation and to empower educators to connect their students to the world's most pressing issues, such as food security and climate change, the very issues that we're discussing here at the Borlaug Dialogues, and the issues that we know that agriculture is facing today, but also into the future. So it's my great honor to be joined by 41 current and future educators that are engaged in professional development experiences around the Borlaug Dialogues. The 25 global guides are a cohort of experienced educators from different disciplines that are engaged in a 9-month professional development program designed to develop their capacity to address issues of food security in their classes and programs. So please help me acknowledge these rock star educators. Global guides, please stand up. So a special thank you to the World Food Prize Foundation for supporting and funding the Global Guides program. There are also 16 pre-service candidates with us in the room today. So to be clear, These are future agriculture educators. And as we think about developing the next generation of leaders in agriculture, these are the folks that will be educating them. Goals participants, please stand up and be recognized. And so I'd like to acknowledge that this program is currently funded by USDA NIFA. So if you're still wondering how educators can make a difference and why on earth they're at an event like the Borlaug Dialogues, let me tell a story. A few years ago, our Global Guides had a conversation with World Food Prize laureate, Dr. Jan Lowe. If you know Dr. Lowe, you know she's all about that orange flesh sweet potato. When she came into the room for a conversation with the Global Guides, two things happened. First, a culinary arts teacher from here in Iowa developed a better understanding of her role in agriculture and food security education. You see, as Dr. Lowe talked about the diffusion of the orange flesh sweet potato in sub-Saharan Africa, this teacher is better able to understand the important role that the culinary arts plays in the issue of food security. So she went back to her classroom ready to share with her students how important the aspects of food preparation and nutrition education are under the utilization pillar of food security. And the second thing that happened was that one of our teacher participants from Honduras raised her hand and said she was unfamiliar with the orange flesh sweet potato. And the next thing that we knew, this teacher had coordinated with Dr. Lowe, the International Potato Research Center, and Zamorano University to get orange flesh sweet potato germplasm into the country of Honduras. Students from Ms. Shunk's class grew the sweet potato seedlings in their school greenhouse and then dispersed them into the community. That's the work that educators can do. So what's really exciting is that we have 41 educators with us in the room today, and there's no telling the impact that they will have on the scores of communities and the youth that they influence. Imagine if there were more opportunities like this for educator professional development, both here and around the world, where educators could truly be a partner in community development and food systems transformation. As one of our Global Guides said this morning, she said, I know that Norman Borlaug said, take it to the farmers, but I think we should take it to the teachers too.
Nice.
Thank you.
That's great. Thank you so much. Thank you for that perspective. Now I'm going to bring Mary Robinson on camera to join us. Mary, as I mentioned, is president of the Canadian Federation of Agriculture and a producer in Nova Scotia, Canada. So we thank Mary. This is a busy time and it's harvest for you. And I know that you're joining us from a farm. We really appreciate your being with us and the leadership that you bring to the NAAAN from Canada. So Mary, over to you, please.
Thank you, Carrie. You can hear me all right?
Yes, you're perfect.
Great. Okay. I wish I was there with you, but I am here in Prince Edward Island on the east coast of Canada, and we are in the height of potato harvest season, which is always a very exciting time. As president of Canada's largest general farm organization, I'm acutely aware of our long-term decline in farm population. Less than 2% of Canada's population is now involved in agriculture. And I raise this because I think it has direct bearing on the decline of our public agricultural extension services. With fewer people to reach, reduced political support, and corresponding challenges demonstrating return on investment to governments, we've seen extension funding plummet, and the private sector has stepped in a large part to fill that void. In some respects, we have seen some real successes. The North American Certified Crop Advisor Program, I think, is a good example and plays a critical role in providing an infrastructure to share knowledge and deliver advice while requiring continuing education of those advisors. After some provincial governments pulled out of extension services, agricultural graduates were suddenly faced without those employment opportunities, and eventually government-led research took a step back, resulting in private businesses with, understandably, a much more direct mandate of profitability filling those gaps. And I don't say this to point a finger at any private businesses, as private support and leadership are important drivers of innovation and profit in agriculture. Supporting the diversity of research and the talent needed for agriculture requires profitability and return on investment for a variety of business models throughout the value chain, beginning on the farm. We are at a pivotal point in agriculture. Climate change, which we've heard mentioned a few times, has seized public policy discourse, but it has also seized the youth of today and is viewed as the most pressing issue facing their future. For agriculture, our potential as climate solutions providers holds immense opportunity, both in demonstrating our sector's unique strategic importance, as well as a means of engaging future generations of top talent. Meeting this potential requires innovation centered on research that spans basic exploratory science all the way to commercialization, and a skills pipeline that ensures top minds in the next generation look to agriculture as an area of success and exciting opportunity. Canada is uniquely positioned. We have a small population, large land base, and abundant natural resources, but we also have post-secondary faculties of agriculture desperately needing to modernize equipment, labs, and classrooms to remain globally competitive, attract top students, and give them exposure to the full spectrum of Canadian agriculture opportunities. At the farm, talent attraction is just as important. The capital required to get into farming makes return on investment foundational, but ours is a high-risk industry facing increasing regulatory burdens and growing mental health challenges, to name just a couple. We need to see that public goods agriculture can and does provide, supporting the profitability and lifestyle needs of a vibrant future farm sector. This requires governments, post-secondary research institutions, the private sector, and farmers working collaboratively to ensure those interests are aligned and appropriately supported through public policy, a diverse and robust agri-food research and education network, and an extension system that engages farmers in informing its priorities and benefiting from its output. That alignment, centered around a profitable and sustainable agricultural sector, asks new questions around the future, diverse extension needs of our sector.
Thank you, Mary. That was excellent. Thank you. It's wonderful to get the producer's perspective as well. Very much appreciated. And for taking time to stay with us during harvest as well. And now we're going to turn over to Luis Martinez, our colleague from the Embassy from Mexico to the United States and a member of our NAAAN group. Luis, please.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Carrie. First and foremost, I'm honored to be in Des Moines. At least from our country's perspective, Des Moines, Iowa is a reference, as our Secretary Villalobos has mentioned during this trip, it's a reference to agriculture. Iowa State University is a very important element to knowledge and to the prosperity to this industry in this sector. But also I want to thank, because I would like to talk more on how Mexico got involved in NAAAN. So we want to thank, first and foremost, President Tony Frank, David Nielsen, you, Carrie, for bringing us on board on this important initiative, on this important effort. And why is that? And although once we got together, we identified that the three countries needed to go beyond trade. Normally, we see Mexico, Canada, and the U.S. as a trading bloc. USMCA normally takes the role in what's happening with the three countries. So we needed to go beyond that, and that is cooperation on different elements. Normally, yes, we have cooperation in different sectors, in different industries, but I think agriculture needed to go beyond that, or at least update it beyond that. So when we first arrived to identify how will be our role in NAAAN, we certainly identified that we have very different aspects and policies regarding extensionist services. We have different goals, even different biodiversity elements. Just to give you one fact, Mexico, for example, is the fourth largest biodiversity country in the world, with more than 200,000 species of plants and animals. That's obviously a blessing, yes, but that's a big responsibility. And that needs to coexist in whatever we're going to do towards climate change, towards production, towards food security, towards new generations, and the list can go on and on. So instead of, once we identify we were completely different or had different aspects, may I say, with extensionists, instead of heading back and not listening to that and you know what, there's nothing to do, I think that propelled more interest between the three countries. So yes, we think that extension service must play an important role, an important link, an important element and core within the agricultural industry, not only in productivity or rural development, but into supply chains, into exports, into building capacity. That will be an important role. So there were three elements that the three countries identified as common challenges that we needed to land on this as an initial step in this effort, in this initiative. First, it was the productivity threats from pest and disease. So that is the need to build a coordinated biodefense mechanism to have the capacity to a rapid response. And we're seeing that, just as Secretary Vilsack, Secretary Villalobos, and Minister Vivo just mentioned, we have in our own hemisphere African swine fever, for example. So we need to act fast on that, and that not only takes the coordination between the competent authorities or agencies, but as the whole industries, and that includes the researchers, the students, the teachers, everybody to be aware of that. The second element was soil and water management. And those are two big elements, not the only ones, but big elements to mitigate and be resilient towards climate change. So the three countries have their own challenges on those issues in different aspects, but I think it will be important to share to one another. The third one that I think for this group is very important to hear is the aging of the rural population. So that is sometimes sometimes in our countries we don't listen to that, and that is very important. So we need to prepare and motivate next generations of farmers, agribusinesses, people, leaders that may continue to be involved in the agricultural sector. And not necessarily you have to be an agronomist or an agricultural scientist to be involved. You can be a lawyer, you can be a medical doctor, transportation. So that's the uniqueness of agriculture. That is across all over the other sectors: energy, transportation, education, medical, climate, economics, policies. In any of that, agriculture will be there at the front, even textiles. So that was very important to see, to guide, and see how the three countries can continue to motivate next generations. So what we did is that the three countries need to first try to address and identify what are each country working on. Obviously, the U.S. is pretty far away from what we're doing in Mexico, at least. They have this great system of the land-grant university coming from the 1860s, from the Civil War. So that has been working as a basis to where we want to go. Not necessarily exactly can we implement it in Canada and Mexico, perhaps not, but we need to look at it that way. So what we did is we went each country, we started working on drafts, on chapters to see where are we located, where can we identify it, and where do we want to go after this. So for that, I want to thank first and foremost the country's team of their own chapters, the Canadians, the U.S. and the Mexican teams. They have been doing a great job, because the task was not only, okay, let's do a chapter, but coordinate all those institutions within each country to facilitate the information and identify the good elements that each chapter will bring to the whole effort initiative. And I would like to anticipate a few elements that, at least from the Mexican chapter, are important. And these just a few. For example, it has been identified that the Extension Service obviously is an important link to the social aspects of many communities and towns. It's a link to communities, to individual farmers, associations, government entities, and also to the private sector. So that what the private sector may be able to demand, extensionists may be able to coordinate that and translate that into to the farmers. So let's get the use of that word extension. It's an extension of the research, it's an extension of the farmer. Another aspect that was identified that, at least for us, it was very important is how they played an important role to elderly farmers that only speak a native language. They're the only ones in a community can communicate directly and make able to understand different best practices, new innovation, even regulation aspects. And another very important element that I found is that in a lot of communities, just like Secretary Villalobos mentioned, like in the state of Guerrero, that is southwest of Mexico, and many other states in Mexico, where migration has played an important role of men going into urban areas or going into other countries. Women are the ones who stay at the farm. So certain practices of the extension services are aimed and addressed directly into women. So that are very elements that can we rescue from those chapters that can later on be used not only among the North American extension services, but can be shared to the world. For the first time, we're bringing this effort of having this extension service between these three countries, between this not only trading bloc, but these partners, that we're more than neighbors, because neighbors sometimes can move and they can go. We cannot go anywhere. So we're more than neighbors. We're allies in many aspects. So thank you so much for this initiative. Thank you for inviting Mexico and Canada into board on this. And I hope there's further on to the discussion, and we're looking forward to it.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you, Luis. And I want to thank all our panelists. So Mary, thank you very much. And Melanie, Rob, and Luis. We hope that we gave you some food for thought and spurred your imagination into all the different ways that education, research, and extension come together and what we can do together. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Wallace Ip. How are we doing on time, Wallace? Do we? Oh, okay. Tell me when we don't. Okay, then we're going to have a little conversation amongst us then. I'm interested in what we brought up amongst ourselves, and especially, I think, in the development context, where education, research, and extension come in. What do we think as we look forward to looking to the next generation of leaders? What is some of the most important aspects that you hope that the NAAAN will help to stir up or to create or to ignite and catalyze with others? When we think about the next generation of leaders, what do we know from our own programs that might be missing or that we need to kind of cultivate? Anyone? Go ahead. Sure,
So
Bob.
when I was listening to Luis, he gave me an idea. He mentioned about the relevance of the innovations that are happening in North America. And, you know, right now we have a whole reassessment occurring in terms of our relationships at USAID with the Northern Triangle countries in Central America. And it made me think about organizations like Zamorano. Some of you might know Zamorano in Honduras. That would be an ideal partner where NAAAN could bring in, I think, really interesting innovations, a two-way street. It's not about taking them and showing them how. It's about, you know, just professional exchange opportunities. And the other thing was thinking about that when parts of Mexico aren't that different from parts of Central America, and there could be a lot of relevance, but also, relevance from various approaches used in Canada and the U.S. and techniques and the whole education piece that Melanie spoke to. So that would be one thing that, I'll watch this as it's developing. It's just starting, but obviously agriculture is a huge mainstay of those economies. It's enormous. And of course, our countries are very interlinked, all North America and Central America. Thank you.
Thank you. That's great. Anyone else from our team?
Well, I would say this is a great opportunity to bring our educators into the equation and think about how can we then draw the youth into the picture. And so, just as you ask the question, the thing that popped into my mind was making sure that our future generation understands those linkages between our three countries. And one of the excellent ways that we could do that is making sure that we get to know each other across those borders. So, yeah.
Thank you. That's great. And I love what you said, that we're not neighbors, we're practically family, Louise, because we're stuck together, aren't we?
Yes, certainly. And I agree. There's something we need to do to have a better understanding and knowledge between each other. I think at the agency level or 30,000 feet, we understand perfectly that, and we have a fluent and common communication. But I think we need to bring it down. I haven't seen a sort of an interchangeable aspect between youth, even on a social aspect, between agricultural students, or even at the high school or college level, between, at least from Mexico with the U.S. We've been trying to tackle that aspect, building to that gap. We need to do more. Educate, translate, but also send the message that agriculture not necessarily is someone that is on the field in the middle of the sun, and we have to change that paradigm of that in agriculture. Agriculture is more than that. Starting even from the reason of eating is the first reason of agriculture. So yes, we need to be more efficient, effective in communicating that to the next generations. I think some of them are catching this, but I think we need to do more.
Thank you. I think that's a great segue. I would like to know, though, Mary, in terms of community and in fostering community and production and Canada and the rare perspective that you also bring to us, I wonder what you think is missing or what we need to cultivate together.
Sorry, Carrie, I'm having
Can you hear me?
I had a little trouble hearing you.
Okay. What do you think in terms of community, and how can we cultivate youth together? What do you think?
Well, I honestly believe that a good portion of what we need to do is, in Canada anyhow, is ensure profitability, because we know that young people seek out exciting opportunities where they're going to be properly rewarded. And I think if we can work a bit more on profitability, reduce the regulatory burden that so many farmers are facing right now, and just generally, things as simple as rural infrastructure. We certainly know that the infrastructure needs of agriculture and rural Canada are closely intertwined, and their fates are as well. So when we look at how are we going to ensure that we've got young leaders, new entrants into agriculture that are going to be those leaders on the production side, I think we just need to have a more holistic lens as to how all of the different agencies and departments within government in particular are contributing to their successes or maybe setting them up for failure.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, I think now we're good, and I would like to ask Wallace Sipp. I want to thank our panel. Thank you so much, everybody. And Wallace Sipp, who is Vice Counsel and Trade Commissioner for Agriculture at the Canadian Consulate in Denver, also co-moderator of our program, will now take the stage and take over for our discussions together. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Carrie, and again to our wonderful panelists. I'm Wallace Sipp. I'm with the Consulate General of Canada in Denver. We are so very pleased to have all of you with us today. So next up on our agenda is the roundtable discussions. So this is where you, as our audience, our experts, and our partners will have the opportunity to interact with our fellow panelists, your fellow educators and extension practitioners, and most importantly, to share with us your ideas. So the outcomes of today's discussions will be used to inform the NAAAN steering committee of our future work plans, specifically on the theme of youth and the next generation of ag leaders. So on the screen in front of you shortly, you will see the 3 questions we would like you to discuss among your groups. How do education, extension, and research work together in your lives and careers? What tangible next steps would you like to see in place to build up the next generation of agricultural leaders? Which partner and or program that is successfully tackling the challenges ahead should NAAAN partner with? For those joining virtually, you received 2 Zoom links, one for English and one for Spanish when you registered. In a few moments, I'm going to ask you to click on one of those links where our technicians will assign you to one of the 4 English and one of 2 Spanish breakout rooms. Each virtual breakout rooms will be hosted by a moderator to help guide the discussion, and our moderators are Francisco Escobar Vega, Victor Rodriguez, Kathy Wotecki, David Nielsen, Carl Larson, and Kristen Rebar. They have all been instrumental to the work of the NAAAN, and we thank them again for their support today. Now to our in-person participants, seated at each of the roundtables are members of the Borlaug Global Guides and students and faculty a part of the GOLD program. They have also graciously agreed to help facilitate today's discussion here in the room, so we are so excited to have you with us. Now, you have 30 minutes for these discussions. Those on Zoom will see a 5-minute countdown toward the end, and people here, I will let you know as we wrap up. Now, at the conclusion of these discussions, we invite everyone here and online to please come back to join us in the main room for the closing remarks from Secretary Vilsack, Secretary Villalobos, and Minister Bibeau. Now with that, have a great discussion, and we'll see you shortly. Thank you.
Mr. Secretary, I believe you're moderating this panel. I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you very, very much, Chancellor Frank, and certainly an opportunity to welcome you to the state of Iowa and back to the Midwest. Your roots are not far from here. It's great to have you back, and certainly appreciate the opportunity to be with you this afternoon, and want to thank the Minister for being here virtually and taking time not only to participate in this panel, but also an earlier panel for the World Food Prize. And as well, Secretary Villalobos has been with us the last couple of days. We've had a very good time together and learned a lot about a number of issues. You might wonder why the 3 of us are engaged in this effort. And I would say that it starts with, because Tony Frank is a big Abraham Lincoln fan, any event that he is involved with there has to be a mention of Abe Lincoln. You know, Abe Lincoln's idea was that information would be developed and then extended out into the countryside to increase agricultural productivity. And I think it was appropriate during the course of his presidency that the land-grant system was established. And the purpose of that land-grant system was essentially to convene and to extend. To convene people together, to share knowledge, and then extend that knowledge out into the countryside. And this network is really just an extension of the convening power of a land-grant university and the notion and need more than ever for a sharing of information and best practices as we deal with issues involving agricultural productivity, as we deal with issues involving climate, and as we deal with some of the threats and challenges with pests and diseases that can impact and affect our ability to feed the world. So it's important, particularly for North America, to join together because we represent, in Canada, the United States, and Mexico, 3 of the largest agricultural economies in the world, and 3 of the most successful agricultural economies in the world, and 3 of the largest productive agricultural economies in the world. So it makes sense for us to work together collaboratively to address many of these problems. And in large part because of the passage of the USMCA, the trade agreement between our 3 countries, it seemed fitting and appropriate for this network to be established. And I want to thank the folks at CSU Carrie, thank you very much for your leadership in this to get us where we are here today. So I'm going to stop. I'm going to turn it over to Minister Beau for a few comments, and then Secretary Villalobos will follow, and then we'll just have an interactive conversation between the three of us, which should take about 20 minutes or so. With that, let me turn it over to the Minister. Madam Minister, it's all yours.
Thank you, Secretary Vilsack, and greetings to you, Secretary Villalobos, as well as Canadian Federation of Agriculture President Mary Robinson, and your fellow panelists and the Barlog Global Guides. I would like also to thank our host, the North American Agricultural Advisory Network, NAAAN Steering Committee members, and the Secretariat, and Colorado State University Chancellor Tony Frank. I understand you just had some great discussions on education, extension, and research, and offered ideas on how we can support the next generation of agricultural leaders to address the challenges ahead, all of which are key to fostering an even more competitive and integrated food industry across the continent. I'm pleased to join you virtually, although I would have loved to attend this event in person. Over the next few minutes, I want to share with you 3 specific ways Canada is working to build opportunities for the next generation of agricultural leaders. The next generation of agricultural leaders will need to be well equipped to meet both the challenges of climate change and food security, as demand for food is growing worldwide. Young people are the future of agriculture. By bringing them at the leadership table, we are more empowered to improve food security and to build a sustainable food system. Last year, Canada launched the Canadian Agricultural Youth Council to hear the voices of young people who have the most stake in the future for our industry. The feedback we are hearing from these young women and men is extremely valuable in shaping our government's vision and policies. We have initiatives like Canadian Young Speakers for Agriculture, a great opportunity for youth from across the country to gain leadership skills and put their ideas out there. And through our Youth Employment and Skills Program, we are creating thousands of jobs to give young Canadians a taste of working in agriculture. The food security crisis during the pandemic is the single largest increase in human hunger ever recorded. Global leaders must strive towards the UN Sustainable Development Goals as never before. Canada supports FAO's emphasis on innovation, including biotechnologies and digitalization, to increase food production while safeguarding the environment. Canada collaborates on a number of international initiatives, including the Global Research Alliance on Agricultural Greenhouse Gases. Scientists from Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada have contributed to the Borlaug Global Rust Initiative with their discoveries of 2 disease-resistant genes, which will help protect wheat crops worldwide while reducing reliance on pesticides. Extension, like research, is at the core of effective responses to the challenges of today and tomorrow in agriculture. Domestically, we are working hard to help Canadian farmers maximize the natural ability of their lands to capture carbon, adopt transformative clean technologies to reduce their GHG emissions, develop and share best practices through living laboratories, and control pests while reducing reliance on pesticides. Organizations like NAAAN play an essential role in building upon existing extension services and in promoting innovation and best practices across North America. This meeting is a great opportunity to discuss high priorities across the 3 countries, from climate change and natural resource management to biosafety issues like African swine fever surveillance for Dominican Republic and Haiti. During the post-COVID recovery period, we need to keep working in close collaboration on key areas that will help to prevent supply chain disruption. areas like trade, extension, career development, and mental health for farmers and ranchers and their families. We are all in this together. Thank you all for the work you are doing to support the next generation of ag leaders.
Thank you, Madam Minister. Mr. Secretary?
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. When Secretary Vilsack and Chancellor of University of Colorado State University invited me to join this network, I was very, very pleased, very happy, and very enthusiastic about this possibility to join such an important advisory network. So I appreciate the invitation, Secretary Vilsack, and it is a great opportunity because, as it has been mentioned, there are a lot of challenges that we are facing, and the only way to address them, it's about complement each other in North American, the three countries, and this is part of the reason why I think we can face and we can assume some responsibility, not just only to address issues related to our three countries, but also the responsibility that we recognize we have as a big players in food production worldwide. So this is a great opportunity for Mexico to join Canada and the United States in such an important advisory network. So we appreciate very much the contribution of all of you and the institutions that are involved, the universities of states, the University of the Provinces of Canada, as well as the institutes that joined this effort from Mexico, from my country. There are issues that I would like to raise despite our differences in terms of ecosystems, in terms of different levels of development. This is not just a limitation. In fact, I consider this as an advantage because we learn each other. We can share experiences in issues related with the aging of our farmers, for instance. So we have to deal with this, and that's happened in the three countries. So how we can enthusiast the young people to see in agriculture activities or see in agriculture production systems and a good way to do their living. And this is one of the important aspects that we have to work together. Also, as it's been mentioned, we are facing problems related with the uncertainty of climate change. This climate change is affecting agriculture, and agriculture is not the problem to increase or promote climate change. It's a part of the solution. And in that aspect, we have to implement, we have to innovate, eventually we have to contribute to adapt our agriculture to these phenomena that are completely out of our control. So we have the responsibility to continue producing food for increasing population, and we have to do it with considering different aspects related to good agriculture practices, a good mechanism through which we can reduce the negative impacts of the environment. And for that, we will need the experience, the contribution of scientists, and also the mechanism through which we can communicate all this knowledge to the farmers. So this is, for me, a very important reason why we consider this advisory network as the best mechanism through which we can facilitate the access of the information and also to be able to advance in these important issues that we are facing. And I don't have any doubt that we will find solutions gradually as long as we communicate, as you help us to really transfer all this information to the farmers. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Mr. Secretary. I'm just going to add just an additional comment about the importance of this. We've already talked about the trade relationship between our three countries and the importance of that to farmers and ranchers and producers. We acknowledge the need for us to collaborate on climate. I think we recognize that there is a joint interest in curtailing the threat of pests and diseases There's another opportunity as well, and that involves international organizations. All three countries are active and engaged in a variety of international organizations where we discuss with the world standards, where we discuss with the world ways in which we can protect agriculture generally. And I think it's important for North America to understand the significance of our voice in those international organizations. So this advisory network gives us an opportunity to have the kind of dialogue, to develop consensus that in turn translates into us going into OIE, going into Codex, going into other international organizations with a common theme, a common message, which can amplify and support and strengthen that message in those international organizations. So there are an awful lot of reasons for doing this. Now, I'm told that my job is to moderate, so that means I get to ask the questions. I don't have to answer any, which is good. So I want to put the two of you in a room. I want you to know that you're in that room with a couple of students, say from Colorado State University or from one of the universities in Canada or in Mexico. And they want you to make the case to them to be involved in agriculture. They want you to make the case as to why they should have a career and a lifetime of dedication to agriculture. So, Madam Minister, I'm going to ask you first to make the case to that skeptical young person that agriculture is where a profound opportunity exists. Make it.
Thank you. Well, I think, when you're looking, you're come to a certain age and you're looking for your career, it's a gift when it's not only a job, but it's a passion. And working in agriculture, it's a sector that literally feed the world, and it provides so many opportunities. You can develop skills in various sectors and grow in this sector. So you can be interested in being really in the field. You care for the environment, you care for your land, your animals, or you can be very interested in technologies and science. Agriculture offers such a wide range of opportunities, and you know that what you are working on makes a difference for the world, for your family, but also for the planet and for the world.
Mr. Secretary, make the case.
Yes, well, thank you. If I have in front of me a student that is making his mind in order to choose what kind of career he will decide to adopt, I will encourage him or her to study agronomy. And I may say that this is the only career that make possible to transform natural resources in food. And this is a miracle of why knowledge and why the studies and the professors help these students to really understand the importance and the impact of being able to sustain, maintain, and also insist in transform all these resources in food. So all the rational, all the experience, and eventually the studies that create this capacity need to be accompanied with the notion or the vision that we have to do it properly, and we have to do it taking in consideration that new generations will need also the natural resources to continue producing food for the population.
Those are two excellent responses. The Secretary and I were at Iowa State University yesterday, and we were taking a look at some of the activities up there. And one of the things that they showed us was a plant science institute where they were developing a sensor that was able to determine whether or not a particular ear of corn needed fertilizer. And in fact, the folks at Iowa State believe, based on their research, that perhaps as much as 30% of the fertilizer that's applied today, at least in the United States, is unnecessary. Now, this is an enormous factor and a finding that could have profound impact on the way in which we farm and on the emission, the greenhouse gas impact and effect of agriculture in the U.S. and globally. So I would say to this young person, you have a chance to be a detective. You have a chance to understand the characteristics of a particular crop or a particular acre of land, and to understand it so well that, like a surgeon, you can be incredibly precise with what you do with that crop and what you do on that acre. And I don't know that there are too many occupations and professions where you have to combine the knowledge of actually knowing how to plant and grow with the engineering that may be impacted and affected with a sensor instrument like that, with the data collection and analysis that must be done in order to determine whether or not that ear of corn is like another ear of corn down the road. And it's an area where there are so many intersections with so many different disciplines that there's not any place that you can't enter into agriculture. There are multiple ways in which you can have a profound and passionate career in agriculture. And I think part of what we would hope be able to do in this network is work with young people in our respective countries to make sure that they understand how exciting, how transformative, how amazingly complex agriculture is. And once they understand that, then I think that there are ways in which they will see the economic value, the societal value, the human value of participating in this industry. And it will begin to address the challenge that Secretary Villalobos has just identified, which is the aging nature of our farmers. And that gets into a whole series of other occupations as to how you build supply chains. So just a tremendous opportunity. I'm not sure how much time I've got. Do I have time for one more question for these folks? One more question, okay. Make an easy one, okay. He's a comedian. All right, you're still in that room, and the young person basically pushes back and says, but agriculture is so responsible for the greenhouse gas impacts and the effects of climate. Give me one thing agriculture is doing to address climate change. Convince me that agriculture is, as you say, the solution and not the problem. So I'm going to start with you, Mr. Comedian. You can answer that first.
Well, thank you very much. It is a very important question. And yes, there are many different practices through which we can really reduce or diminish the impact, particularly all the aspects related with production. So in our country, in Mexico, we are implementing different technologies, very simple one, in order to avoid or to reduce how we can adapt agriculture to the impacts of climate change. One of them is very simple, is rotate the different crops. And doing that, we can, of course, protect the crops from pests, because when we rotate, we substitute some crops that we cultivated permanently, then we create pests and diseases that affect these crops. So with time to time, we have to rotate, and we have to incorporate legumes with the cereals, and then we provide nitrogen to the soil, and then, of course, we reduce the cycle of the pests that affect a specific crop. So this is a very simple practice, and we are doing that in different regions of the country. And this is the mechanism through which we can, without applying chemicals, we can control disease and pest.
Madam Minister, you get the final word.
Well, I would say to these young people that I would recommend a work term on a farm, because we all know that our farmers and ranchers care for their land, for their animals, and they have always tried to do their best as far as the knowledge, the science was available. But now, at our time, much more information is available. We are pushing on science always more. And I mean, this is such a time and an opportunity we have in front of us to do things even better, because this is, I mean, for farmers and ranchers, their land is the most important thing they have. So of course they want to take care of it, and they are looking at every opportunities to do a more sustainable agriculture. So just I would encourage them to join this journey to do always better. To feed, I mean, we will continue to eat. So let's do it the best we can in putting all our skills together and making things the best we can.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Minister and Mr. Secretary. Thank you very much, and we appreciate the opportunity to be here today. And I think you can see from the consensus and passion that we bring to this that this is a network that's going to be successful in bringing us together. So thank you all very much.
Thank you. We want to thank everyone who participated to make this afternoon a success. We thank the World Food Prize for allowing us to be here as a side event. Thank you, Secretaries Vilsack, Villalobos, and Minister Bibeau. Thank you so much. Thanks to the Global Guides, to the goals. We can't wait to hear what you do with your lives. And I would like the NAAAN team to just please stand. All those who have been a part of our work, they're mostly in the front. But this is a collective effort of Canada, Mexico, and the United States. So thank you very much, and we look forward to coming back to report with you on our progress and what we do in the years ahead. Thank you.